My first big one as a co-producer, it was A Beautiful Noise, which is just a spectacular story of Neil Diamond's life. It's a very, very special story. Subsequently, I'm involved with Harmony, which is another incredible story that's coming out.
And I see Barry Manilow wrote the music for that.
Barry Manilow wrote the music.
Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. So glad you're here with us today. We have a fabulous guest, and he's not new to you. You've known him from previous show. My dear friend, Jonathan Corr, who was gracious enough to come on our show when we were just spledslings, just starting up, one of the first few shows. And at that time, he talked about his business career and his stellar performances in the industry, where he was one of the top guys on Wall Street. Well, here he is back now in his quasi-retirement, which means he's only doing 30 things instead of 50. And he is the producer of one of the finest shows on Broadway, A Beautiful Noise, the life and story of Mr. Neil Diamond, but brought to us by Mr. Jonathan Corr. Jonathan, so glad to have you back with us.
Hey, Carl, it's so nice to be here. It's so good to see you. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, believe me. I am so happy for you. You and Ray, I imagine, because when I look up on the notes and the things, it says you're co-producers. So I can't neglect to say that. I should have mentioned in the beginning his lovely wife, Ray, and Jonathan are co-producers of A Beautiful Noise. And now tell me, how did you come to this place from a very busy business schedule, doing the things you were doing, and it seemed like almost overnight you're a producer, not one, but soon to be two shows, right?
Well, it's actually even more than that, Carl. I'll tell you.
Well, come tell me.
We worked together. You were, a wonderful member of our board at Ellie Mae, and I was there for almost 20 years, and retired from that in the middle of COVID after we did that last deal. And I've always loved the theater. I went to school in New York City. I spent a lot of time down at Broadway. I lived in London for a bit, went to the West End, dabbled a little bit, acting in high school. And then I did some improv when I was in San Francisco. And so always loved it. My kids have gotten into it. We're big supporters of children's theater, a performing arts center out here. My wife's on the board of, called I Can Do That Performing Arts Center. And my daughter is now involved in the business. So, when I retired, my wife had said to me, maybe, and she was kidding. She was kind of, this was a few years back. Maybe the next thing you should do is, invest in Broadway. You love it so much. It happened about 2 years ago. It was very beginning of last year. We were sitting having dinner with some of our very best friends, and the wife said, hey, it's pretty cool. My brother is a co-producer on a show on Broadway. And I said, no kidding, really? What is he doing? And at the time, he was doing Company, which was a big revival.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I'll connect you. And so I connected with him. And, he also was an entrepreneur and someone that got into this. And he introduced me to this incredible lead producer, Ken Davenport. And Ken is the lead producer of The Beautiful Noise, Harmony, many other shows. He's a Tony-winning producer.
And company to be with.
And we really connected on that. And I basically, what happened was, I said, okay, and how I am. Once I kind of, I'm involved in something like this. So help me understand the business model. And so what I learned about Broadway shows, whether they be plays or musicals, everyone is a little startup, right? It is,
sure.
It's a business that is set up as a limited liability company. The lead producer is the CEO. They are putting together the pieces, trying to get the the intellectual property, and then, getting it funded up front, maybe with like front money, which is like seed financing.
Yeah, right.
And then pulling together the creative team, the director, the writers, the composers, the lyricists, and, doing workshops and readings, and then getting it beyond that to be able to bring it maybe to an out of town tryout. Like we actually started A Beautiful Noise in Boston, and then ultimately getting it to Broadway. So, what was interesting is like, wow, it sounds so similar to what we used to do in the software business, right? And very, very similar in terms of like, developers are like, kind of crazy creatives, and just like, the creatives on Broadway, and,
Right.
and you do previews, which is kind of like doing a beta of software. And so I said, I kind of understand this. And like anything, that small business, there's risk in it. So they kind of said to me, well, it's risky. And I said, well, I get that. I've been involved in other things. They said, well, you should diversify if you're going to do this. I said, okay, I get that. I'll do that. And so pretty quickly I got involved in, a few shows. I actually was also involved with Funny Girl, as well. But my first big one as a co-producer, it was A Beautiful Noise, which is just a spectacular story, of Neil Diamond's life. It's a very, very special story. Subsequently I'm involved with Harmony, which is another incredible story that's coming out.
And I see Barry Manilow wrote the music for that.
Barry Manilow wrote the music for that, and
names you're attached to.
And it's a true story of the biggest group that we've never heard of.
Yeah.
They were incredibly successful in the 1920s, in Germany, did a dozen movies, sold millions of records, and the group was eliminated by the Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich, because three of the men were Jewish. And it's incredible because, the story is coming back. They were huge. They were like the Beatles of their time. And everything about them was destroyed except little pieces of history. So that's coming out very soon. And then I'm actually involved in 8 other projects right now.
8? My goodness. You're going to keep me busy on the Broadway just for your shows.
And so it's fun, I mean, obviously in terms of helping raise funds, but I also get to touch on the creative side. And, in particular, Ken Davenport, really, he's an entrepreneur, right? He's a lead producer, but he's done many startups type of thing. That's me in shows. And so he really appreciates the business input. So a lot of the things that we talk about are things like marketing, straight business issues.
Right.
And then I get
that you're very familiar with.
And then I get to give my input on, on shows and scripts and demos, because, I'm a consumer. And I think that, the best lead producers, right? They've been through it. They know how to, fall down and pick themselves back up. They know how to bring together collaborators, in the end, they know it's really about coming up with a product that resonates with the audience. And, that's so similar in anything you do in business, right? And then basically doing research, like actually getting feedback and improving the product, as it goes along. And so it's a kick. I love it.
Okay. I have to ask you this question because I know you and I have certain similarities, and different in many ways, but very similar. I know that you and Ray and the children love music in your home, and you had a karaoke system and you love to sing and all that. And I'm a handboat singer myself. Yeah. What was it like when the first time you met Neil Diamond and you said, I'm going to be producing this man's life on stage? What did it feel like?
It's amazing. It's surreal. I mean, it's very special in that, Neil is huge, hundreds of millions of albums, top 40s, crazy. And, but he's just a man. And, he sacrificed a lot through his life to get where he got. And it was also very interesting is that the only thing that gave him real pleasure at all, from the very beginning as a songwriter to being a performer, was his music and the adoration of the fans. And so this story is very special in that, Neil, Mr. Diamond, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease back in 2018. And, he can no longer perform. I mean, he happened to do Sweet Caroline at opening night.
I saw the clip of that.
Which was absolutely amazing. But, he can't perform anymore. And this was his identity. This was everything about him. And so, the story is really told. And again, it's so special in that he's in his therapist's office, talking with his therapist, where his third wife, the one that's really stuck and it's very special. Obviously, he had two other great wives and children and so forth along the way. But his third wife has begged him to go there and come to grips with this. And so the whole story, this musical, is told from the therapist's office with him telling his life story, coming to grips with the fact that he can no longer perform. And is he okay with that? Is he okay with that in his life? Because it was everything. And then around him, the history and the music and the beauty all happens. And it's so special. And it's got so many, it's obviously, if you're a Neil Diamond fan, right? And you love the music and so forth, it's beautiful. But the story also is about, life, success, making trade-offs, mental health. I mean, all the things that, a lot of us deal with.
So I imagine he helped write it because it's his own story. And I imagine he was willing to be very transparent because people who are huge images to the world sometimes have egos that don't allow the shady side of themselves to be seen. So he had to be very transparent and willing.
Yeah. So he didn't write it, but he sat with the man that wrote the book.
He contributed.
And, he told the story and they decided this is the way they were going to tell it. And, I think he's come to grips more and more, as you watch him along the way over the last, year or so, he's it was a little bit more subtle, like the Parkinson's references, but, as we've gone along, he's, very much embraced it. He's in a much, more relaxed place now. And, even like, I was there, it was wonderful last April, this past April, it was National Parkinson's Day. And so we did, we raised, and I was very much part of it, a very significant amount of money, for Parkinson's, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we presented it at the end of the show on the stage to the Parkinson's Foundation. It was wonderful.
Terrific. That's the kind of thing, you have to give back in your spirit as well as your finance. It's one thing to write a check, something else to go beyond yourself and organize something to get people involved and make it into something very meaningful like that. Yeah. I salute you for that. That's wonderful. Yeah. That's wonderful. So the show is doing wonderful. I know that everybody I know who sees it raves about it. There must be all kinds of Tony talk going on. I can't imagine there not being,
Well, Tonys, we with last season for the Tony, unfortunately, we didn't win a Tony, but, for us, it's really about, people love the show. It's fantastic. It's like people come back and see it. I haven't encountered anybody that hasn't been moved by the show and loved the show. And so we're really excited, that we're lining up. We'll have a tour that'll be, starting in the fall of next year.
Are they coming to Florida, I imagine?
They will be at some point. And, there's all kinds of talk about, doing shows, all over the world. And it's just it's very exciting.
It's
and,
very fitting too. He's a superstar, and it's only fitting that the world embrace him like that and let him see in his, he can appreciate it, how much he's admired, and how much his music is still known. It's wonderful. So unfortunately, Tony Bennett has passed away. You got Neil Diamond taken care of. Dealing with Barry Manilow. The only thing left for you is to get a big fat Italian like me and let me do 10 years.
Yeah, no, we've got some other interesting ones cooking. We have a show based on Harry Belafonte's life and development.
Wow.
And a number of others. I actually have 3 shows coming out this fall. I have Harmony, which we just talked about, which is this story that Barry wrote and was off Broadway, very well received. It was a New York Times critics pick off Broadway about a year and a half ago, and that's opening on Broadway in October. And it's a wonderful story. True kind of Broadway, 6 young men, kind of a cappella group. That's what it was. And they're kind of like, this boy band from the 20s, and it's a wonderful story. And, and obviously the destruction of what they had created and is very timely with all the things going on with anti-Semitism and so forth right now. So we're really excited about that. But also
I did a couple of shows with Holocaust survivors, and some of that story is so poignant that it must be kept in front of people's faces all the time. It can never be forgotten. And so anytime you have a human interest part of it to bring up that goes beyond the physical tragedy, and you can see all that was lost, all the culture that was lost because of that insanity, you got to bring these things forward,
Well, it's what's amazing about this story, Carl, is that, these guys were in Germany. They were, super successful. Just mind-boggling. And they came and they performed at Carnegie Hall. And they were buddies with Albert Einstein. They were hanging with Josephine Baker, and they could have stayed, right? They could have become huge in the United States, but they were being they had their loyalty back to their home country, because at that point they didn't really know it was going to turn to what it did. And so they decided to go back to Germany, and, shortly thereafter, things got really bad. And it's very sad in that, everything that they created was, for all intents and purposes, destroyed. Their records, their films, etc. And then they were dispersed, and some ended up being forced into the war and passed away. Others ended up in other parts of the country. One of the members, the guy they call Rabbi, who was actually had been training to be a rabbi, but he was a cantor. He was singing. He actually ultimately made his way over to the United States with his wife, and he was a rabbi and a cantor in San Francisco for many years.
Oh my, really?
And he then went down, and I think he moved down to Palm Springs, Palm Desert, and he passed away like in about 2000. He was in his 90s, and the story is told from his perspective as this narrator, thinking back on what, he's the last guy, and he's telling the story, and it's just so special. Wow. And the music is wonderful.
Well, I can imagine. They were the stars of their time, and then you get a guy like and writing the current music for it. It's got to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good.
So do you find yourself singing in the car and in the shower while your new shows?
Yeah, I sing. I'm not that good a singer, so
everyone's a good singer. Everybody's a good singer.
But no, I was just yesterday I was on a walk, and so the cast album is actually out. So you can actually go on to Apple Music or Spotify or anything where you stream and click on Harmony Cast Album. Harmony.
I can do that because I'm on all those networks for this show, so I can do that.
And you do that, and you can hear the music for the show, which is very unusual. Usually a cast album comes out after a show's been running for a while. But in this case, because we were off Broadway and they made a gamble, they recorded it, not knowing we were definitely going to go to Broadway. And then when it was announced, we decided, to release it. And so it's been out for a week or so. It's on the Billboard charts for like top cast albums right now. And you'll get a taste of it. It's, you'll love it.
So from a business influence again, do you find, or the people you're working with find that the shows are as well attended now in New York, in spite of the bad news about New York? New York has a rough picture with the immigrants and the crime and so forth.
New York has evolved over the. I mean, when I was in New York, when I went to school at Columbia back in the late '80s, New York was really tough, right? And over the subsequent 20 some years, between Giuliani and Bloomberg as mayor, that the whole Times Square area was cleaned up. The city, kind of progressed. There has been a little bit movement back, but I still think it's a great city. It's in I think in wonderful shape. Times Square and the theater district is lively. It's such a destination. And, the thing that obviously let's slow things down for a while was, COVID and people not traveling, but things are back up again, right? I'd say that, we're back close to, if not ahead of where we were pre-COVID, and so there's all kinds of shows going on, and it's a wonderful place to be.
I'm a born and raised New Yorker. Nothing frightens me in New York. I get walk the streets. I do. Nothing bothers me. But I hear so many people afraid to come because of what they see on the news, and they don't realize that they think they're going to run into thousands and thousands of immigrants on every street, and every place you go, there's going to be gangs of people breaking in windows to break into stores. That doesn't happen. But
no.
Fortunately, the press is so biased in the way it reports.
Well, the press. Obviously there are incidences, right? And that's what people put on the press and end up spreading on social media. I live out in the Bay Area, in San Francisco area, and I would tell you, I am so much more comfortable walking around New York, walking around the neighborhoods there
San Francisco
than San Francisco. Yeah, it's to me, it's a very different picture.
That's going to be tough to get around, but that's another story for another show.
Another story. Yeah.
So, we're delighted for you, and I certainly look forward to seeing all your shows. And I'd love to see when you do the road trips. Anything that comes to Florida will go, of course, to see. We can't always fly up to New York to see the show, but we would love to see all your shows. And
thank you.
And anything, your daughter's involved in the business now. Is she?
Yeah,
Beanie?
She was a performer for as I think like we told you, she was a performer, but she played a lot of lead roles, and but she is someone that really likes to influence the entire picture. And so as she was a performer, she found herself wanting to get into the choreography and the directing. So she's now, she's what they call in the industry a multi-hyphenate. She does a lot of things. She was a performer. She still would, like to perform, but she's more focusing on being a director and choreographer. And she is assistant directing on Broadway right now. So it's a dream
career than the dancers have.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, I'm just so happy for you. I can't begin to tell you how happy.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Please tell Ray that we are so delighted, and we would, whenever possible, we'd love to see you guys and just get together and break bread and just be in each other's company, because I really, this, I've always thought you're the most wonderful person and I have loved my association with you over the years.
Yeah. The feeling's mutual. The feeling is mutual. Thank you so
I'm
much.
so proud to have you in my conclave. I really am. I really am. I love it.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is our show today. I hope you appreciate it. You have it from the man himself. How wonderful Neil Diamond is. How wonderful these new shows. This harmony sounds fantastic. I can't wait to see it. And Broadway is alive. And it'll continue to be alive when you have the influence of people like this. So go see the shows. Jonathan's information is all going to be in the show notes. You can click on and see what he's doing. I'm sure he's got websites and things that'll guide you along all these places. And if you have an idea for a great show, you'll listen to you. No, right?
You never know. You never know.
So I remind you, we have a new show every week. And I want to remind you also, you all have your own story. I know that. Everybody has their story. No one can tell it like you can. Make sure you tell it to your friends, your loved ones. Write it down. Because when it's too late, it's too late. And all that wisdom is gone. The story he just told about this rabbi from California who reminisced about the times in the 30s before the Holocaust took place. If he hadn't shared that story, it might have been lost forever. Write it down. Tell people. Your story is important. And I tell you what I tell you every week. I'm this big, blustery guy from Brooklyn. What do I know? I know this. Get somebody in a big bear hug today and tell them you love them. Because you may be the only one that's told those words in a long time. And certain people really need to hear it. Tell people you love them today. I love you, Jonathan.
I love you too, Carl.
I really do, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao. Talk to you soon.